Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors China webinar on your China roadmap. This is a methodology that I have created in 2020 to put people, leaders, entrepreneurs, as well as companies on the right path to success with their China journey. So for your reference, this will be approximately a 60-minute session. In the handout section of your control panel, you will find a handout where you will be able to work along with me in today's session to design your action plan in relation to your China roadmap. So download that handout and use it to your advantage. I've left it in a PowerPoint PPT format so that you're able to make your own notes as we're talking directly in that document. So before we start today's session, again, this is always a chance for me to get to know who my audience is. And there's always a variety of people that are on here. So do let me know who you are. It's always more fun when there's a little bit of interaction. So if you are a newbie, let me know. Newbies are basically those of you that might be in the very early stages of your China development. You've either been reached out to and discovered an opportunity, or you're looking for opportunities, and right now you're trying to gain a sense of how things work in China, how to do business, and educating yourself on how to protect your business as well. Then you've got the startups in China, and generally speaking, the startups are those that have already been transacting in China for about 1 to 3 years. And they've been so focused on their core business that they've kind of forgotten about compliance issues and how to use the administrative functions to their benefit and their efficiency. And then naturally, you've got the experienced China hands. So it'd be great if you guys could type in. I'm not going to call out names today, because there is a lot of content I do want to go through, but do let me know who you are. Type it into the chat section of the control panel, and let me know if you are a newbie or a startup or an experienced China hand. So how the webinar works is basically that you are now on the GoToWebinar system. If you run into technical difficulties, unfortunately, I can't help you as I'm presenting, and I have no other staff that are on this with me. So please just know we are recording this, and a link to the recording will be provided to everybody. Copies of the slides won't be provided, but you do have the handbook, which if you use to your advantage, you will work alongside with me today. Then if there's anything that happens on my side, so if I run into any technical difficulties, which might happen, it usually takes about 30 seconds to 1 minute for me to reboot the system, and then I will be coming on and finishing today's presentation. So please bear with me if I do get logged off, or if my sound system fails me, I will be rebooting and coming back on. Now, it's always fun to have an interactive Q&A, so if you do have questions, please insert them into the chat section of the control panel. Usually in my webinars, the Q&A is always the best part, as people really then start interacting and asking away. So use that to your advantage. Again, this is about 60 minutes of your time spent, so use it wisely. So who am I? My name is Christina Kohler-Kalucha. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I've been working for 17 years in the China corporate services and compliance sector. And I am one of the leading experts on inbound investment into China. And I'm also a creator of the China Roadmap methodology, which is all what we are going to focus on today in terms of how I have been helping these international companies enter the Chinese market. Just so you know, we do have an upcoming webinar series from this. Oh, I didn't amend the dates here, but it's from the 23rd of November, I believe the 23rd. Let me just check in the calendar. It's from the 23rd of November to the 27th of November. We're going to be doing a 5-day series on managing your accounts and tax in China. So we've got topics all about preferential tax policies, VAT, avoiding tax audits, implementing internal control systems, and then also profit repatriation strategies. So let's begin with today's presentation, your China roadmap, okay? So basically the China roadmap is something that I created, which is basically a step-by-step plan for people to enter the Chinese market. So there are 3 milestones, which are opportunity, implementation, and growth. And within each of those opportunities, it is a requirement to earn 3 superpowers. So in total, there are 9 superpowers that you need to obtain in order to get yourself protected, get your back-end operations smooth, so that you are able to focus on critical management decisions that have to be made throughout your China journey. In today's presentation, we will be looking at all 9 of these superpowers, and in the handbook, there are action plans into what you should be doing to protect yourself and educate yourself and as a journey, okay, so consistently, all right? So what are the problems if you don't follow the roadmap? Okay, well, ultimately, I'm going to give you 3 or 4 case studies today, which will be highlighting the mistakes that people have made coming into the Chinese market. And what I want to highlight here is that none of them are actually true, or at the time, they weren't actually mistakes, because I'm going to give a little bit of benefit to these companies. You don't know what you don't know. And that's one of the key things about China, is you really don't know what you don't know. And there is so much to know. There's so much education that you have to learn regarding doing business in China, that it is such a key component to being able to survive in the market and to eliminate as many obstacles as possible. So the first thing that I want to highlight here is a case study from an Austrian company that had set up a meeting with me. And again, this was maybe about 10, 15 years ago. And they came to have a meeting with me, and I didn't really understand what was the agenda of that meeting, but they came in and said, we are exhibiting on the Cial show. We are a candy company out of Austria. And sorry, we're not exhibiting, we are attending the Cial show. And we already have, I believe it was a 20-foot container product that was on the water on the way to China. And so I said, fantastic. So you have a distributor or you're making contacts. How is this all going to actually work and pan out? And they said, no, we're going to meet people at the trade show. We just want to be on time when orders are placed to be able to deliver product. And I said, so how are the goods arriving? Where are they going to be warehoused and stocked? Oh, we won't need warehouse. We anticipate that the full container will be sold during this Cial show. And I said, okay, well, that's fantastically optimistic. But what happens if you don't? And they hadn't even thought of that consequence. What happens if we don't? What happens to the product? Where is it going to be kept? What will be the warehousing charges? They were just so optimistic by what had been portrayed about China, about the food and beverage sector in China, about Cial as a trade show, etc., that lo and behold, no deals were garnered. There was a lot of interest, but no deals were garnered. On top of that, they ran out of samples very, very quickly because people were just trying, right? They weren't analyzing who should actually be taking those samples and how critical that aspect might be. That in the end of the day, this 20-foot container was sent back. And because it is candy, it's perishable item, they had to all be thrown away after a very short period. So one of the key things I want to highlight is research is creating new knowledge. You need to educate yourself about the food and beverage market. You need to go to China using that as a research platform, not as a thought process that products should already be in China just in case. The whole point of the trade shows is to meet people, it's to network with people, it's to develop relationships with people. Things won't happen automatically at that moment in time if that's your first trade show in China. In addition to that, if you're trying to display products and you're trying to provide samples, then purchasing a booth at these trade shows is much more beneficial than having a little suitcase and trudging along with samples and then just throwing that out at random people instead of using it wisely in terms of who you're going to hand those things out to. So although they thought they were being very clever, very smart, bringing in goods so that when orders are placed, which is fantastic, but they hadn't done their research. They didn't even know who was going to be at the trade show. They were too excited and anticipating too much. So they basically had to throw away a full 20-foot container of product. I believe it was 20 foot. The next case study is of a German company who came into the market about 20 to 25 years ago. They are a lock company, hence the photo. And in regards to their business, they found a fantastic distributor, had the most amazing relationship with this distributor, to the point where they allowed this distributor to register their trademark in China under their company name. So they never formulated licensing agreements or anything like this. It was, we give you product, you please go on and sell that for us. But obviously over time, we're talking 20, 25 years, China really opened up, and there were a lot of things that the company discovered that they could do by themselves, whether that was marketing, maintaining relationships with end clients, whether that was B2B, B2C. They realized they could actually take the distributor out of the supply chain, set up their own entity, and do a lot of those functions themselves. But lo and behold, what they discovered was that the ownership of the trademark belonged to the distributor. So actually they could do nothing in the Chinese market unless they purchased the trademark from the distributor. And obviously that costs money because the distributor didn't want to lose the business and they wanted to gain some certain leverage over the company, right? And it just turned into a sour, I don't want to say a bad relationship, it turned into a sour relationship, right? So the key thing is remembering, even today, people are more knowledgeable. People are seeing a trend of what happens in the Chinese market, and that eventually people do go it alone. So the biggest item you've got to understand is what assets do you have that you should be having control over and that you should be owning in the Chinese market, okay? The next case study is in relation to a company that had been purely 100% sourcing and manufacturing in China. They had between 80 to 100 different suppliers producing a variety of different consumer products. And they had a falling out with one of these suppliers who, as an act of bad faith, registered the trademark with the Chinese Trademark Office, the brand name of this overseas company. It's a global consumer brand company. And the outcome of them registering their trademark with the CTMO office and then subsequently registering that trademark at the customs office meant that any shipment leaving China with that brand mark belonging to the supplier was halted at customs. This all led, to make a long story short, this all led to the company not being able to export anything that had the brand name on it, whether the brand name was on the product itself or on the packaging, outside of China for a period. I believe the court case lasted about 3 to 5 months. I forget the exact time frame. Because they were able eventually to prove that this supplier had registered the brand in bad faith. Now, as a reaction, because it was critical for them to be able to export those products that didn't have the brand on the actual physical product, they were exporting in cartons that were blank. So hence why this photo has blank, no brand names on it. But any product that physically had the brand name on it, they couldn't export. So it halted their business. Now, when they came to us saying, well, we've never registered our trademark, we said to them, well, why not? Well, we're not selling in China. We're not marketing our brand in China. Why do we need to register it? And that's a mistaken concept in China. When you are looking at your brand name, whether you are sourcing, merchandising, manufacturing, or even simply selling, or if you are even providing services in the Chinese market, you need to register your trademark. Anybody doing business in China needs to register their brand name in China in order to avoid any of these situations. So, again, you don't know what you don't know. And their assumption was, well, you only have to register a trademark if you're actually doing marketing and branding in a jurisdiction. Yes, that makes sense, but you need to do it regardless of what functions you're doing. If you're simply doing business there, you need to be able to register it to protect it, okay? And just remember, preemption by action is the best form of protection. You do not want to waste capital and budget on these types of court cases that last 3 to 5 months and then ultimately halt your business. The next case study is a joint venture that was established in Tianjin. And I completely, 100% blame the foreign investor in this case study because they paid attention to nothing. They left too much trust and faith in the joint venture partner. After a period of 3 years, can I reiterate that? 3 years, they decided to do a health check on the company and wanted one question to be answered. Why are we still not profitable? Okay, so we went in to do a health check from a legal and as well as an accounting and tax perspective and discovered many things. The main item that we discovered was the fact that the joint venture partner was remitting out of the joint venture structure a sum of 50,000 renminbi to who we then later found out was his brother, who had no association with the company. Okay, and I want to highlight here, capital was funded by the foreign investor. The running and operation and the local network was supposed to be provided by the Chinese joint venture partner. The second mistake that we found was that when we asked for a document, we always ask for a document list to begin the health check process. We asked for the financial management reports, the last audit reports, etc. And what the foreign investor provided us with was documents that were only in the Chinese language. And when I came back to them and said, but you do have English versions of these, right? I mean, you have been reading your financial management reports. And they said, no, we've always been given the Chinese version. When we ask for English versions, we never get it. There's never a response. Or they say, yeah, we'll give it to you at some point in time. And I say, well, why didn't you at some point just get a Chinese translator? They're from Australia, in Australia, to translate the P&L, the balance sheet, the trial balance, and the audit reports. Why weren't you proactive enough to do that work? Literally, they were simply not paying attention. I just want to highlight here also, there's only a 2-hour time zone difference. So to say that there are issues with communication is completely wrong to have. They had all of the ability to communicate, to travel, to physically sit in the office, sit with the accountant in Tianjin and say, can you explain to me the audits and explain to me the financial management reports? They never did it. So they, for 3 years, were completely blind on the financial status of the company. Other aspects then came out of the woodwork as well in terms of the trademark registration, how the trademark was being utilized, etc., etc., etc. And obviously, this all ended in a very bad divorce, where naturally the foreign investor, this Australian company, really did not want to go back into the Chinese market. But having said that, they also did not pay attention to it. Okay, so the biggest question that I ask people nowadays when they come to me and they say, we want to go into China is, what are your financial resources looking like? And what are your time management resources looking like? Because you will need people to supervise this operation and to pay attention to the business. So the whole goal of the China roadmap methodology is for people that are dreaming about expanding into the Chinese market. They know that there are barriers, whether that's language, cultural, just generally how to do business in China. And I hope that what I will be able to show you today by following this China roadmap methodology is that you will create a solid, flexible strategy plan. You will create a system where you have complete transparency over either your transactional business or your organization in China. You will be able to sleep at night knowing that your company is in compliance. You will have operational guidelines in place so that you can detect red flags or warning signs, and you will then be able to pivot or make decisions very quickly in order to fix those. You will be able to read, understand, and analyze your financial data. And most importantly, you will be able to avoid the most common mistakes and obstacles that foreign investors have made in the last 30 to 40 years, because you're working with someone who has that knowledge level to be able to cover those mistakes and obstacles. And ultimately, what I want people to get out of this is that when you go into the Chinese market, because of the speed of the market, your goal should be that your attention is focused on making decisions on growth. Whether that means pulling back sometimes, pushing forward other times, having that balance is critical. But in order to do that, you need to make decisions quickly. And we need to create a system that allows you to do that. And that's the whole point of the China roadmap methodology. The 5 biggest problems that I see with companies and entrepreneurs is the lack of communication with people in China. It's turning a blind eye on ethics. So turning a blind eye, and then obviously the ethical situations sometimes you get yourself into. It's having inexperienced but cheap staff, or inexperienced and expensive staff. Everybody makes the assumption that in China, you don't have to have a large budget. Everything is cheap and easy. That is a false pretense in 2020. It is expensive. And last but not least, they just simply have no data at their fingertips to be able to, first of all, create a plan and a strategy and a budget, but second of all, to continue to amend, evaluate that business plan, strategy, and budget. Having data is something you need to continuously have at your fingertips. You have to know who the new players are on the market. You have to know what their benchmarking, what their price benchmarking looks like. You've got to know what the market segmentation is. You've got to know if there's loyalty amongst customers. This is data that you have to continuously have, okay? And you can't change that. So these are usually the 5 biggest things that I see going into the Chinese market. So what is the solution? Well, the solution is making sure that you are organized and prepared. So for those of you that have just joined us, I want to mention to you that in the handout section of the control panel, there is a handout that I have uploaded into the system that you guys can download, which is basically your little workbook on how to follow the China roadmap and what your action plans would be. So definitely download that handout. I've left it in PowerPoint so that you can easily amend directly into the PowerPoint presentation and take notes. So you don't actually have to print it out unless you prefer to do that. All right. So what is the solution? So the solution is basically getting on this China roadmap where you have 3 milestones: opportunity, implementation, and growth, and the 9 superpowers that we're going to investigate today in terms of what action plans you have to take on those. So the first stage, or the first milestone, is obviously you have to gain a certain level of awareness on the Chinese market. So either you have been approached by somebody in China, or through your own research, I guess, you have found opportunities that exist in the Chinese market. But at the moment, it's at a very superficial level. So in order to be able to understand whether there is a true opportunity for you in China, you need to go through three superpowers. One is education, one is research, and one is then putting pen to paper and developing a plan and a budget. So the first superpower is education. It's building a knowledge base on doing business in China so that you can make appropriate decisions when and if needed. I say this, I think this is probably one of my biggest commandments about doing business in China is truly knowledge is power. And I will refer back. I mean, in the end of the day, what you don't know, you don't know. And there is so much to know, right? So education is the first thing you need to start getting into a habit of obtaining, okay? This is something that has to be continuous. You have to constantly learn, okay? And the more you know, the more leverage you will have in whatever business dealings you have in the Chinese market. So obviously the biggest question for most people is, well, how do I get myself educated free of charge? Well, that's why I'm here, I'm gonna tell you. So how do you get educated free of charge? Well, obviously, so I've listed five of the main ways I get educated. I'll also give you a sixth in case that's something that might interest you. But first of all, you've got lawyers. So there are a bunch of lawyers in China that have free e-newsletters highlighting all the latest regulations that are coming out. And they also do webinars that are also free of charge, okay, or even informational sessions. The second are corporate service providers. So Woodburn would be one of those. This is a free complimentary webinar. There are hundreds of us out in the Chinese market, sometimes even specialized in jurisdictions where you will get content in whatever language is your mother tongue, free webinars, again, informational sessions, and just always remember when dealing with lawyers and corporate service providers, that first meeting is always free of charge. You might even get a follow-up meeting that's free of charge. Don't underestimate free calls. That is already a form of research for you, okay? Why I'm emphasizing this, so I'm happy to refer my network. And you know, I'm working with a lot of consumer brands who want to have a network to market research or data analysts, as well as marketing agencies. And I always do a follow-up. Have you reached out to them? How was this discussion? What did you think? And occasionally, but this has been happening more and more frequently, I'm getting feedback saying, oh, Christina, the people you've referred are just way too expensive. I'm like, oh, really? So you've spoken to them and you've gotten proposals? No, I actually looked at their websites and I found them, they look very expensive. Said you're basing you're making a decision based on how pretty a website looks. So quite frankly, considering I referred to you marketing agencies and research agencies, I would hope that their websites are pretty. But to not take advantage of a free conversation, understanding what these providers can, first of all, offer you, how they're going to offer you, how they also can provide advisory, and then finally, what are their related fees? Why are you giving that up? That's free research. And that just leads me to either the point that maybe China isn't a priority yet, or number two, they're not following through with this China roadmap methodology. Everybody that you're going to build in your ecosystem, and ecosystem is superpower number 4, are vital. Okay, they are vital individuals that you need to have in your ecosystem to help you and push your business forward. Everybody is vital. If you have 5 contacts to marketing agencies, that is brilliant. It means you've got backups. If something doesn't pan out well with the first one, you've got 4 other backups to fall back on. And to not have had conversations with them is at your fault, okay? Because you need to understand what is everybody's capability. And if they turn out to be expensive, they turn out to be expensive. They might not be the right provider today, but at least you have that transparency and you know that upfront. So whether it's lawyers or corporate service providers, in this list, you could also have marketing agencies, HR professionals. Everybody has newsletters. You know, I send out 3 a week. You might not read all 3 in a week, but save them. Because when you do have time, you should reflect back on it and just read through the information really quickly. So you have that knowledge level. I subscribe to a lot of agencies. I save every single newsletter because I know I'm going to go back when I have a time to breathe. I will go back and read those articles, again, to increase my own education. The next 3 are in relation to types of associations. So chambers of commerce in China. So for example, if you're from Germany, if you're from the UK, if you're from Belgium, you will find the local chambers of commerce. Do not underestimate those chambers of commerce. I'm a member in China of 4 of those. And then I'm actually a member of one that's overseas. They are superb. And I'm saying this being a China experienced hand, okay? Because as a newbie coming to China or as a startup, first of all, they are fantastic to develop a network. They have newsletters, which have articles from a multiple amount of service providers, different service providers. They have webinars or live networking events, live ones, let's forget about that for now, but at least they have online webinar sessions and trainings that they offer you as part, sometimes as part of the actual membership fee, to be able to expand your knowledge level and just, again, increase your network. So, for example, in Shanghai, I'm a member of the American Chamber of Commerce, Canadian, British, and Australian. And overseas, I'm a member of the China-Britain Business Council, which again, in the UK is fundamental. If you're going to China, you want to be associated with that association, okay? They have, I believe, oh gosh, I don't even want to make a mistake here, but I think they have like 13 offices in China, and they have, I don't know, 15, 16 business advisors spread through the UK, all the way up to Scotland, who provide free, you know, advisory as part of the membership, but also this whole networking, B2B, B2C matchmaking service, etc. And then, since about 2 weeks, you've got the EU SME Center coming into phase 3 of their operations. They are government funded, government subsidized by the EU. And they provide online free research reports. Sometimes you have to pay 50 euros for it. 50 euros is peanuts, guys, for research. But it's all very macroeconomical research reports. So, you know, if you are going to download the one regarding the meat sector, meat industry, you will find that it's a huge document, okay? So you'll have to really look through it to get the data that you actually want. I also subscribe to Lexology because that is a business sector I'm in. I need to get legal updates, and I get daily a newsletter with between 10 and 20 different articles from different law firms in China about the latest regulations, the latest operational guidelines, implementation guidelines, etc. So I'm updated on a daily basis on that. Education is fundamental. I can't emphasize that. I read a lot, and I read a lot because I need to know what is going on. And don't forget, you also need to get subscriptions to the South China Morning Post, to Caixin Global, to Shanghai Daily, to China Daily. If you're based in the EU or even in the UK, you can even get the original European China Daily. I think it's once a month. So, you know, get yourselves up and running in terms of newspapers and whatnot, so you are familiar with what's going on in the Chinese market. So in your handbook, what I would like you to do, if you've downloaded it, is make a plan. How are you going to educate yourself? So in number 1, very simply, you can type in Woodburn Accountants and Advisors webinars, as well as publications. Okay, what are you going to put for number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5? I've listed 5 here, but your education should actually be absolutely continuous. And it should be from a multitude of providers, associations, or whomever that can help you. So how are you going to educate yourself? Yeah, use this handbook for yourself, right? Make your notes on how you're going to move forward in terms of your China plan. Superpower number 2 is, so hold on, I also want to highlight here about educating yourself. If you are in a specific sector, right, then you will want to get sector news. Okay, and you have the ability of getting that information again from service providers that are specialized in that. So for example, because I have a lot of clients that are in the F&B sector, I get updates from a company called ADN Imports that is focused purely on the food and beverage importation, overseas food and beverage items importing into China. And they send out newsletters and guidelines and basically the latest updates about how to import food into China. So if you are in specific sectors, find those niche importers, exporters, distributors, so that, and again, you know, they'll have newsletters and they'll have updates in order to be able to educate yourself. Research is superpower number 2. I truly believe that you can't develop a strategy for China without having data at your fingertips. I don't know how you would put pen to paper without that. So first of all, there is a variety of research you can do. As I mentioned, the EU SME Center, I believe also the China-Britain Business Council, and many of the overseas associations do research studies. I feel like it's very broad though. But what research are you looking for? Are you looking for a distributor list? Are you looking for a supplier list? Are you looking to do competitor benchmarking? Are you looking to do a brand awareness and reach study? Are you looking to understand satisfaction and loyalty analysis, product testing? What are you looking to gain? What data points do you need to understand the opportunity that exists in the Chinese market? And don't forget, this is something that's continuous. You continuously have to do this research, okay? You continuously have to evaluate the opportunities that exist in the market. There are a lot of ways you can do this. And the biggest question you might ask is, well, I can't travel to China right now, so how do I do this? Well, you outsource to providers that do offer this. Weigh out the cost of spending a flight ticket, hotel, and domestic expense that you would incur versus outsourcing it to a company. Probably be very similar. And don't be shy to reach out to these market research companies to understand their proposals. What can they actually offer you? What would be their methodology of getting the data? And usually it takes 2 to 3 weeks to get this. So one company actually joined my China roadmap methodology, and they took this idea of research and actually they did a focus group on their food product. And the immediate outcome after 1 week of focus groups was that they had to completely change the packaging of their product to entice consumers. The packaging was a huge issue. So they went back, approached the board and said, if we're really going to go into the Chinese market, we're going to have to change our packaging design. Should we invest in this? They got information within 5 working days. They then went back, made a decision and said, what are they going to do next? Okay, this is critical information. So again, take out your handbook, guys, and list out what data points do you have now and what data points will you need to put pen to paper to put a strategy down. Okay, so listed on the right, on the left, sorry, is what do you have, and listing on the right is what do I need. All right, list that out point by point so that you have an overview of what you need. Now, just as a tip, because actually I just had a conversation yesterday regarding this, is don't forget you also have trade departments in your jurisdictions. Okay, so you have trade agencies, trade commissioners who are not only based in your home jurisdiction, but are also based in China. In theory, if you reach out to them, so For example, you have in the UK, the Department of International Trade. In Germany, you have, I'm going to translate it, you have the Overseas Chambers of Commerce who help you. And I know in Germany, there are 4 people appointed solely for the Chinese market who are there to act as advisors for you. Every jurisdiction has them. I see somebody here from Canada. In Canada, you've got the Canadian China Business Council, as well as the Trade Commissioning Department, who can provide this information for you. All right. So, and that's generally free of charge. So that could be your first point of contact in terms of your education, is reaching out to those trade commissioners and seeing what data points they can provide you, what statistics can they provide you, can they give you export volumes, import volumes, etc. Okay, easy way of getting info. Once you've got a certain level of education and once you've got data points at your fingertips, it's now time to put pen to paper. You've got to create your game plan. All right. And this game plan is a strategic game plan. So it's something that should not just be short term, it's something that you should create that's long term. And together with that game plan, you've also got to have a budget. Remember what I said earlier. 2 things I always ask people is, what are your financial resources? How much can you spend? And number 2, what are your time resources? Okay, you've got to put pen to paper. Now, I'm not going to go through this slide, but I do have a lot of people who ask me how to create a business plan. I've listed key chapters here if you need that type of help, okay? You can look back at the recording if you want to look at those chapters. When you are creating your business plan and your budget, don't throw it together haphazardly, particularly if you're looking to show this to investors. You got to impress those investors. Whether that's the investors, your board of directors, or where it's outside investors and you're looking for funding, which everybody is nowadays, okay? You've got to align your business plan with your budget. It has to all make sense. In order for it to make sense, make sure you either align it with the management, or you brainstorm it and have it validated with advisors that are based in China. So you don't want to miss anything out of that plan, out of that budget. So don't rush. Be conservative. I always say it's best to have a line item in your budget that's for emergencies, emergency fundings. Again, that will come down to what your financial resources are looking like, but always have a bit of wiggle room, right? Enthusiasm is fantastic, but not when the results disappoint. So be a little bit conservative. Start early. So, once you start getting into the Chinese market, the fiscal year there is January to December. So you want to create your budget and your business plan from a January to December perspective. And then, you always want to evaluate. You want to monitor it, evaluate it, and constantly reforecast it. Okay. That should be something that everybody has learned in 2020. You want to constantly reforecast it. Everyone has to pivot in some shape or form when there's a crisis that happens. So here again, take out your workbooks. Yeah, pen to paper. What's your action plan? What chapters have been completed? What budget line items have completed? And where do you still need help? Big question, with whom can you collaborate with on this? Right? Where can you get information? Will it be research, education? How will you be able to finish off those chapters and those budgets? All right. But outline what you have now and then analyze what you still need to do. Okay. So in your handbook, I have, for example, this slide up there, and then on the next page, there's a notes page. So you have room to write, take notes, and remember certain things. When you finished milestone number 1, the biggest question you need to ask yourself is, have you been able to evaluate the opportunity for China? When you've put pen to paper, does it show that there is an opportunity? If the answer is yes, then we move on to milestone number 2, which is implementation. So it's all the considerations, it's all the back-end operations on how to protect your business, okay? So in implementation, this can mean either implementing from your head office and doing transactions direct, or implementing an entity in China and doing and operating locally, or it's implementing a distribution system or a sourcing system where you're using third parties to transact, okay? So you need 3 superpowers for this. One is ecosystem, one is protection, and one is system processes. So how do I begin? You need to build an ecosystem. So one thing is building an education. One is also then building a network of individuals, okay? You cannot go to China by yourself. You will need people who support your development and your growth, okay? You need to build an empowering ecosystem of individuals from a variety of organizations, whether that's lawyers, corporate service providers, auditors, HR professionals, marketing professionals, PR professionals, supply chain professionals, market research professionals, and the list goes on, okay? You need to build that ecosystem, and you can't, my recommendation would not just be to have one person allocated in each of those items. You want to have a variety of people. In that ecosystem, you've got to include distributors, licensees, sales agents, employees. You want to be able to include everyone. Chambers of commerce are part of that ecosystem as well. It's a big ecosystem that you need. It's a support system that you need. Now, you could say that the ecosystem should be developed already in stage 1 under opportunity, but you're doing that already under education. It really comes into implementation where all of your ecosystem becomes intertwined, because you need to use a variety of people and use them wisely. So this is why I put it more under implementation. But in actual fact, things should be running all kind of simultaneously, okay? Now, how are you going to meet and connect with people? Well, number 1, if you have WeChat, that will be your sole source of maintaining relationships. So if you don't have WeChat, or you don't know what WeChat is, go up on our website. I've written an article about the top 5 reasons why you should have WeChat, and you should definitely get that. Now, ways to meet people. Obviously, I've put trade shows, but that's very difficult right now. But other ways is also through LinkedIn, WeChat, Chambers of Commerce. That would be your first link. Then, as you start meeting people, you ask questions. Who could this guy refer to me to? It's about having conversations with people to know what they could offer to you and your organization. I also want to highlight here that just because you are connected with someone and today they don't offer you anything, doesn't mean that in 5 years they can't offer you something. Whomever you're meeting in your China journey, maintain those relationships, because you never know if they can become a referral partner, whether they can become a client eventually. You just don't know. Everybody should be a key individual within your ecosystem. Even if today they're probably useless, tomorrow they might lead you to your success. Okay, so make sure that you maintain, you meet and connect and continuously connect as many people as possible. So I would like you guys to list and be aware of who is currently in your ecosystem. And when I say this, you should probably split it out into different sectors, right? Lawyers, accountants, auditors, marketing individuals, distributors, suppliers, whomever, right? Logistics providers, warehouse providers, whomever else. And if you haven't been maintaining relationships with those people, go back and maintain those relationships immediately. The next is then to analyze who else would you need to know to push this project forward? Who else could be valuable to push this forward, okay? Analyze that list and start meeting people, start asking to get introduced. Best way is through the Chambers of Commerce, to be quite honest. Especially as you can't right now travel over to China. So use those chambers wisely. You know, if I'm talking about a membership fee for some of those chambers, you're looking at something like between 5 to 10,000 renminbi for the year, right? So let's say 500 USD to 1,000 USD. In the grand scheme of things, it's not big, considering what you might get out of it if you actually use it to your advantage. The next superpower, after ecosystem is protection, all right? Fraud does exist in China like it exists anywhere else in the world, and you need to be able to protect your business. Now, this is where people start failing. It's at superpower number 5, and it goes all the way to superpower number 9. Okay, because this is where the attention to detail gets lost. So first of all, fraud does exist. It will surprise you when it pops up. Okay, you've got to understand that you're not sitting on the ground in China. So at some point, you've got to place a certain level of trust and loyalty in your ecosystem in China. Employees, third parties, suppliers, customers, whomever. All right. And this can always lead to fraud occurring. And in your China journey, it most likely will happen. Okay. Be prepared for it. That's the whole point of this webinar, is for me to get you guys in that mindset of protecting yourself and your business so that you can sleep at night. All right. So when you're protecting yourself, I've listed here 7 items, but I've also created a checklist for you all, which is in your handbook. So the first is obviously intellectual property. What that surrounds is everything from trademarks, copyrights, patent registrations, product registrations, any type of reports. So if you're in the medical device sector, you might need to have toxicology reports, etc. Corporate governance. Who is going to be, first of all, in the corporate management of your China business, whether, again, that's from your head office. Are you going to have a China team in your head office? If you're setting up an entity in China, you need corporate governance around just how you're going to operate that entity. Having due diligence procedures. Do due diligences on everybody. Okay, you should have complete transparency of who you're working with. Even employees, for people you're hiring that are in senior levels, do background checks. I can tell you something, this will cost a fortune up front, and it should be part of your budget. But in the end of the day, it's in order to secure a very long-term relationship with these people. So if you have transparency up front, it helps a lot in developing that relationship and that trust if you've done your due diligence. When you set up an entity in China, you'll have company chops. How are you going to operate those? I didn't add here, but it's the same for bank accounts. If you have a bank account in China, how are you going to operate it? Who's going to operate it? When you are negotiating trade transactions or service transactions in China, do you have contracts? What are in those contracts? Do you have exit clauses? Have you thought about tax optimization in those contracts or tax liability? Have you thought about just very simple things like who's going to negotiate those contracts? Who's going to sign off on those contracts? Who's going to have the right to sign off on those contracts? The next is inventory and warehousing systems. So are you doing inventory checks? Do you have to do them regularly? Would you like to do them regularly? Will your provider or you have a warehousing software system where you get updates on ins and outs from the warehouse? Do you need a logistical provider? Do you need to be in a bonded zone, non-bonded zone? So many things you have to think about in terms of creating a trade flow or service flow and having all those contracts and all those key considerations within them. Okay. Once you have a list of what you need to protect in terms of your assets, you got to implement them. I mean, Superpower 6 is all about actually doing the execution of those assets. So if you've got a trademark, you've got a brand, you've got to execute the registration. If you need to do a product registration, you got to execute the product registration. Okay? You got to create operational guidelines and management directives. Okay, you've got to do this type of execution. No point creating your asset list if you don't actually execute the protection around them and create those operational guidelines. And I get it, if you're not an administration person, this will be hard work. But this is why you're going to have lawyers, accountants, corporate service providers, HR professionals who actually create these for you up front. The biggest one item that I'm going to highlight here is a case that just one small point is when I get companies who say to me, Christina, we're going to be very small initially, one person, I'll hire then eventually 3-4 people. And I say, okay, well, first of all, you definitely have to have employment contracts. That's by law. And although it's not by law, I recommend you to have an employee handbook. Oh, Christina, this is just going to bring me extra cost, isn't it? Yes, it is. But do you know why you have an employee handbook? Because it's a tool. It's a tool for you to get rid of employees. It's a tool for you to create an operational guideline on how to kick somebody out of your organization. Because what a lot of foreign investors do is they don't rock the boat. They maintain people who don't fit within their organization, who don't help them grow, who actually bring them backwards because they're scared to fire them. But then on top of that, they don't have a tool to be able to fire them. And it's all to save, quite frankly, between 3,000 and 5,000 renminbi as an upfront cost to have that tool. Quite frankly, it's ridiculous. It gets me so frustrated, right? You've got to think about the long-term vision of your company. Yes, the upfront costs will be high because you're setting something up in the new market. You won't have those upfront costs ongoing because you'll have those tools readily available. Having a management directive on how the people in China should be operating, how they should be using banks and company chops, and what will happen if they should breach any of that. It's so vital for your business. The worst is when people have to spend money on lawsuits. It's crazy the amount of money that is spent on lawyers in China just to get people out of a mess because they don't have the upfront tools. I'm giving you a checklist of the upfront tools you need, okay? So on the left-hand side, I've basically made a checklist. This is not even extensive. This is just to give you guys an idea. This here is a checklist. If you're going into the Chinese market, you gotta make a check if you've done it. So on the left, let me explain. On the right is more if you are planning on setting up in China. On the left is just generally speaking if you're doing business in China, okay? So trademark search, trademark registration, domain registration, website development for China, marketing material for China, product registrations, due diligence on partners, operational guidelines, management directives. On the right, it's just a very short list on considerations and checklists you have to make when setting up an entity. But these are the tools you need to protect your business. And again, superpower 5 and 6 is where people start failing because it gets into administrative compliance and nobody wants to deal with administrative compliance. They're focusing so much more on the actual sale activity or business development activity of their business, which is fantastic. But you need someone either in your head office or you outsource it to do these functions for you, okay? So again, very brief checklist. You might find it a long checklist, but there's so much more you have to actually consider. But start with that. So in your handbook, you're going to have this list and cross off what is done. Can I just highlight trademark search is top priority, trademark registration and trademark search. Domain registration you could do in 5 minutes after this webinar is finished. So easy to do many of these items. So have you been able to implement your strategy successfully? Have you been able to cross-check everything in that checklist? You have an ecosystem of people who can help you. Can you then move forward into the third milestone? It takes companies a very long time to fall into that third milestone. It took me between 8 to 10 years to fall into it because I hadn't followed this roadmap back in the day. All right. Milestone number 3, it's all about decision making. Growth. We want to grow and we want to, why do you go into a market? It's because you want to grow straight away. right? How are you going to grow? Well, if you don't have numbers at your fingertips that act as trigger points to be able to analyze your current status and potentially future scenarios and statuses, how can you focus on decisions? Very, very difficult. Now, whether you are transacting directly from your head office, whether you are transacting via third parties like distributors, licensees, whomever, whether you're setting up your own entity in China that has the fullest control system, you need to have a sound accounting system that is specific to the Chinese market that helps you to look, read, and understand the China figures. So whether that you get that information directly from your own China company, whether you get it from your distributor or licensee or whomever, or you get it from your finance team at your head office, you need to get it from someone, okay? And you need to be able to look, read, and understand those Chinese figures. So in your handbook, I've asked a series of questions that are so important. I can't emphasize this. I mean, they might seem so silly to many of you, but are so important. If you are transacting in China, are you checking the numbers? Do you receive the financial management reports monthly? If you are working with third parties in China, whether that's your own company or distributors or licensees or sales agents or franchisees or whomever, you are required by the Chinese accounting systems to produce monthly financial management reports. So are you getting those? Are you also receiving them in English? And number 4, I actually should have put in that in bold letters. Do you proactively sit with your finance team to discuss each line item? Now, if you are a mid-sized firm, this will probably be automatic for you. If you are not a mid-sized firm, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a leader, you have to be the proactive one to do this. Because the distributor isn't going to say, hey, let's sit down and have a chat about the numbers. Okay? They're not. You have to do that. Okay? If they're not reaching KPIs that are outlined in the distribution agreement, or then even if the numbers look fantastic, you should still be sitting down with them and saying, what more could we do? Right? So as a highlight, in China, first of all, in the accounting profession in China, people are very reactive. They're definitely not proactive. So that has to come from you. Okay? Can you communicate with them? So make sure you're communicating with someone that at a minimum speaks English. It's always easier to communicate when you're talking finance person to finance person because of the terminology, but get involved so you learn, okay? And make sure that if you are simply transacting from your head office, that you have the ability, or your finance team has the ability to provide you China data, China finance data, okay? Because those will be your trigger points for the next steps of what you want to do in the Chinese market. Now, all of these things are vital for the next superpower. If you don't have any of these items in place in terms of the operational back end, right, there's no point going on to the next one, because the next one is all about analysis. You need to be able to analyze the current status of your China company. China moves fast. My biggest pet peeve is when companies don't read my financial reports that I give them on a month-to-month basis, but they do it on an annual basis. And then suddenly they're like, wait, why are we at this stage? And okay, well, no, we've got to amend and adjust, and that's too late to do it by the end of the year. China works on a month-to-month basis. If you don't know that, you should know that. That's part of your educational level, okay? So you've got to be able to expand. All right, you've got to be able to analyze data. And again, when I say data, yes, in this context, I'm meaning financial figures, but it's also in relation to data that you're continuously updating yourself on in terms of research. Okay, you have to use those 2 figure points in order to know how to move forward, whether you move forward, whether you have to backtrack a little bit, whether you need to downsize a little bit. I was talking, for example, with a company today based in China, and they told me that in January, February, as COVID hit, and they're in the service sector, and all of their services face-to-face, they had to completely pivot. They invested in software, they had to move trainings online, and they lost 2/3 of their clientele. And so the biggest question was, how do we survive until our software is up and running, that we can do the trainings online? Do we need to let go of people? And they did. They let go of 2 staff members, and they didn't, put anybody in those positions again. They just were able to manage it in-house. But they did this fast. Within the mid of February, they had made those decisions. Okay, so without looking at your finances, without looking at data points, you can't move forward. And you might all think that this is common sense. Of course, this will happen. Trust me, in the startup phase of most companies in China, this is not what they're doing. Don't ask me why, but they don't have this operational system in place where they're doing this. And it is critical. You've got to have this analysis. And ultimately, superpower number 9 that you want to be able to achieve is consistent focus. And I want to emphasize the word consistent. You want to be able to focus consistently on making decisions and moving your company forward. Okay? That should be your focus. What paths do we have to follow? Do we have to create new paths, new revenue line items? Do we have to take products off market because they're just not successful? Do we, is the marketplace, online marketplace for us good? If it's not good, should we exit? We get our deposit back, we invest in another sales channel strategy. All of these things have to be really fast in terms of marketing, in terms of moving forward. So the last question of the day, are you focusing on your strategy and growth plan? Okay, that's the key thing, the key question you should be asking yourself constantly in the back of your mind. All right. So just to reiterate the China roadmap, milestone 1 is opportunity. You're educating yourself, you're doing research, and you've got a plan in place. Implementation is having that ecosystem that is constantly evolving, but it's an empowering ecosystem. You've got these protection, you've listed all of your assets, you're protecting them, and you're executing those protection modules. And then the 3rd milestone is growth, where you're looking at numbers, you're analyzing those numbers, whether it's finance, data points, whatever it might be, and your time spent is on focus, is on decision making. So I would love to know from everybody that's on here today, what were your key takeaways? Please type those in and message me. I would love to know what you learned from today's session on designing basically your own China roadmap. Please type that into me. Nobody's interacted with me yet. Let me know. And I have in the handbook basically a slide, an action plan slide of what your takeaways have been and what you're going to be doing. So use your handbook wisely when formulating, when utilizing this China roadmap. Nobody's interacting with me today. Everybody's very, very quiet. Well, just to reemphasize how I can help you. So again, from my point of view, I can help you build that ecosystem, that network. It also comes down to the education and the advisory, research, creation and validation of plans and budgets. We offer supervisory services for those of you that are looking to establish an entity in China. We do trademark search and registrations, obviously incorporations, and then all the services surrounding implementation and growth. So if you guys are interested in setting up a 15-minute game plan session with me, in the chat section, I'm just going to input the link. Hold on. And you can set up an appointment directly in my diary. Or if you just want to connect via WeChat, and you've got WeChat, some of you have already, I'm going to give you my ID, my email as well, in case you just want write to me directly. And then don't forget on LinkedIn, I'm going to give you my full name so you can find me on LinkedIn if you want to connect on LinkedIn as well. But these 15-minute game plan sessions, you know, there's no strings attached. It's basically just, you know, if you have any specific questions you want to ask, and it's to see if I can help you in any shape or form. So nobody has written anything today. Everybody's been very, very quiet. I assume there's no questions to ask. If you guys do have questions, you know, don't hesitate to put it in. I will stay on here, but there's going to be no interaction today because there's no questions. That's a pity. So again, if you guys want to set up a 15-minute game plan session, you're more than welcome to. And then don't forget, we do have a WeChat China Roadmap community that I've set up. You can connect with us. If you want to connect to that China Roadmap community, you can connect to me on WeChat with my ID, and then just type in China Roadmap. I'll probably ask you a couple of questions before I let you into the community, just to get a bit of an understanding on your background, and then I'll let you in. And the community is basically, again, it's a mini ecosystem of a lot of my end clients, a lot of end companies, basically no service providers. There's nobody going to be selling anything to you on there. It's just a way for you to be able to communicate. If you've got questions or you want to share case studies or understand what people's experiences have been, it's a great way for you to be part of that community. So, and then just to end today's presentation, because nobody has still typed in anything, get ready for our upcoming webinar series. So this webinar series in 2 weeks, week and a half, will be for those who are setting up a company in China or already operating in China. And the topics we're going to be touching on is everything about managing your accounting and tax in China. So everything about preferential tax policies, VAT, avoiding a tax audit, implementing internal control systems, developing profit repatriation strategies. All right, and all of these are up on our website at woodburnglobal.com/events. So you can register for them straight away. We'll have newsletters that are coming out probably next week, I think, highlighting these. So you can also wait for the newsletters to pop out so that you can register. And if you're part of the WeChat community, I'll be posting that as well. So that is the end of today's session, and still nobody has interacted with me. What a pity. But I'm under the assumption that today's presentation was very, very clear. If you guys would like to connect in any shape or form, let me know. It was a pleasure having you on today. I wish you a great remainder of the day and a good week ahead. Take care and goodbye.